But folks, HB 675 was a bill designed to get around a previous anti-trans bill that was struck down in Montana's courts. So they were reintroducing a bill that had already passed with modified language to ban trans people. Okay? And basically, this bill would give private entities and individuals the ability to sue anyone they viewed as promoting drag of any kind. So, in the eyes of transphobes, all trans people are in drag all the time. It's what they think anyway. And yeah, the guy who introduced the bill, again, people thought this was a foregone conclusion. He called it a fetish, being trans. He called being trans a fetish, and that it was disgusting and dangerous for it to be seen in public. Okay? Now, I want to play for you some of the speeches,
Representative.
at least one of the speeches that was given on the floor by Zoe Zephyr. Let's take a listen. Let's take a look.
Representative Zephyr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here I am again to rise on another bill targeting the LGBTQ community. I first want to start off and say, at its very core, drag is art. Drag is a beautiful art. Drag has a deep history in this country, and it is a history that is important to my community. You know, if you are a woman in this body wearing a suit today, you are challenging gender norms that existed long ago. And in some ways, drag does work to challenge those norms. There were 3 articles of clothing laws 50 years ago that said if you wore 3 articles of clothing that were indicative of the opposite gender, that the police could stop you and arrest you. It was those laws that led to the police raiding an LGBTQ bar in New York and led to the Stonewall riots, one of the most important civil rights moments in my community's history. I also want to reject the notion, however, that these are, as the sponsor says, events where explicit content is expected or where audience expect risque entertainment. Drag story hours I have been to here in Montana, they are like Disney princesses reading to people. We had people come in and talk about this. These are spaces where people come up and they sit down in libraries, and parents elect to bring their children and learn about books and the love of reading, and also, yes, be involved in part and to hear stories told from members of my community. That is important and that is beautiful, and I do not think that we should be standing up and saying that this art form, because it's somehow connected to my community, is not allowed. But there's something underpinning this that makes this even more insidious. And the sponsor called this a fix to last session's bill. It's important to note that last session's bill, when it was applied, the first application of this was not on a drag show. It was to prevent a trans woman from giving a history lesson in a library. That's where this came up. That's how this is going to be attempted to be applied, as an attack against the trans community. And we have even more examples of that, because, in committee, when the sponsor closed on this bill, he said, "This bill is needed," he said, and I quote his words, "because transgenderism is a fetish based on cross-dressing." Those were his words for why this bill is necessary. And I'm here to stand before the body and say that my life is not a fetish. My existence is not a fetish. I was proud less than a month ago to have my son up in the gallery here. Many of you on the other side met him. When I go to walk him to school, that is not a lascivious display. That is not a fetish. That is my family. This is what these bills are trying to come after. Not obscene shows somehow getting in front of children. We have the Miller test for that. We have laws for that. This is a way to target the trans community, and that is my opinion and in the speaker's own words. Please vote no.
Further discussion, Representative Essman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To speak to the bill.
Representative.
I'm speaking as a parent and a grandmother, and I'm very emotional because I know the representative in C20 is also a parent. No matter what you think of that, she is doing her best to raise a child. I did my best to raise my children as I saw fit, and I'm taking it for granted that my children are going to raise my grandchildren as they see fit. Everybody in here talks about how important parental rights are. I want to tell you, in addition to parental rights, parental responsibility is also important. And if you can't trust a decent parent to decide where and when their kids should see what, then we have a bigger problem. So I advise you all to vote about parental rights, parental responsibility. And remember, we already have indecency laws in this state. We voted on one, I don't know, earlier this week, last week, sometime during the session. We all wanted to make sure we knew what indecent was, and now we know. Trust the parents to do what's right and stop these crazy bills. They're a waste of time. They're a waste of energy. We should be working on property tax relief and not doing this sort of business on the floor of this House and having to even talk about this. Please vote no.
Question now arises on the motion of Representative C. Hinkle that when this committee does rise and report after having had under consideration House Bill 675, it recommend the same do pass. Those in favor of the motion vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Are there absentee votes?
None, Madam Chair.
Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? If not, the clerk will record the vote.
Madam Chair, 44 representatives have voted aye, 55 have voted no.
House Bill 675 has failed to pass second reading.
Zoe Zephyr's speech pulled, and along with the testimony of hundreds of trans folks in the state of Montana, flipped 13 Republican state representatives into voting against this bill that everyone thought was going to pass. It's W today, folks. That speech was so moving that immediately afterwards, that Republican lady stood up and was
While
like,
this is all going on in Montana, Texas is proposing bills to make it felony fraud to be trans. I hate this state, want to get out so bad.
and yeah, we're not winning everywhere, but you know what? This was a place where we thought we were going to lose. And we won instead. Did it pass? It failed, Foxy Cheshire. Immediately after Zoe Zephyr made her impassioned speech, she, like the Republican woman across the aisle stood up and said, let parents parent their kids, essentially, and told the other Republicans to shut the fuck up about trans people. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But, that's incredible. That's a very unexpected W. Yeah, the second speaker in that video was a Republican, not a Democrat. That's incredible. And I want to refer to Aaron in the morning's coverage on what happened after this. Representative Zephyr is not the only transgender lawmaker in Montana. Representative S.J. Howell, a powerhouse in their own right, took the floor with an even more extreme bill followed immediately afterwards, HB 754, a measure that would remove transgender children from their parents. They had a powerful speech to deliver as well, and we don't have video of that, I believe. Oh, no, we do. We do indeed. Excellent stuff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I stand to oppose this bill. I've spoken a little bit before about how I've had the opportunity to work on issues like this. I served on the Dependency and Neglect Task Force and the CPS Working Group over the interim, and I learned a lot doing that. And one of the things, I think the single most important thing that I learned is that when the state intervenes to remove a child from their family, that is one of the most serious and weighty responsibilities that the state has. That is not something that should be taken lightly. And frankly, I think every time a child is removed from their family, it's a tragedy. Sometimes it's a necessary tragedy, but it's tragic nonetheless, and it has consequences. This bill does not come close to the seriousness with which those decisions should be contemplated. And I want to talk to you briefly about what's actually in the bill. So the first thing you'll see on page 1, line 19, any child protective service specialist, peace officer, or county attorney who has reason to believe any child is in immediate or apparent danger of harm may immediately remove the child. That's existing law. What we're adding down below, line 24, a child transitioning gender with the support of a parent or guardian is considered in immediate or danger or apparent danger of or harm. That's a pretty big statement that we are making. Let's dig in a little bit. Transitioning gender is what we're looking at. It's not defined in this bill. It's not defined anywhere else in MCA. So what does that mean? Maybe it means, like the sponsor said, surgery or medical treatment. Maybe it means therapy, mental health care. Maybe it means a kid who gets a haircut and a new set of clothes. Maybe it means a name change. Are we talking about a legal name change or just somebody who wants to try out a different name? Are we talking about a young person who is experimenting in the safety of their home or their family? Does that count? Does this have to rise to the level of happening out in the world or at school? We don't know. We don't know. A strict reading of this bill could include all of that. So then what happens? Mandatory reporters are now required to call the CPS centralized intake and report immediate or apparent danger or harm to kids because they've got a new haircut and a new name? How is a teacher supposed to know whether the kid who's new in their class is a tomboy or a trans kid? But they're a mandatory reporter, so I guess they're calling. And now CPS have to investigate. This is legislative intent. It's in statute. So they have to investigate. So what happens now? Those CPS workers who, by the way, are already busy working to protect kids and support families who are dealing with issues like domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness, real issues that we know are a problem in our state. They're also out there investigating these reports. And so finally, put yourself in the shoes of a CPS worker who's confronted with a young person, 15 years old maybe, who is happy, healthy, living in a stable home with loving parents, who is supported and has their needs met, and they are supposed to remove that child from that home and put them into the care of the state. We should absolutely not be doing this. Even if you disagree, and I know many of us do, that young people deserve the right to live their lives with freedom and self-determination, including with regards to their gender determination. I hope we can agree that the vision laid out in this bill is not right for Montana. Please vote no.
Now arises on the motion of Representative Schubert that when this committee does rise and report after having had under consideration House Bill 754, it recommend the same do pass. Those in favor of the motion vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Are there absentee votes?
None, Madam Chair.
Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? If not, the clerk will record the vote.
Madam Chair, 27 representatives have voted aye, 71 have voted no.
House Bill 754 has failed to pass second reading.
"29 Republicans crossed the aisle for that second bill, and they killed the fucking bill. They're parents of kids who transition in Montana are not going to be stripped away from their parents. Okay? Like, we've got some unambiguous W's here, folks. It is imperative that we recognize how important and how big these victories are. Okay? It is I know that times are bleak. I know that, there are hundreds of anti-trans bills out there in every state across the country. But it does not mean that, like, we are doomed to lose. These people these trans folks in state politics are working tirelessly all the time so that people across the aisle know a trans person, because that's just good politics. Because ultimately, at some point, there's going to be a bill that is introduced that allows them to that is like, oh, we want to get rid of trans people's civil rights. We want to get rid of trans people's ability to have kids. We want to get rid of trans folks in general from society. And you know what helps Republicans and helps people of all different types of political outlooks to look at that and say, no, I don't think so. Knowing a trans person. It's one of the number one indicators for shifting people over on trans rights. It's just knowing one of us. Because so many people in this country do not think they know a trans person. And to them, we're scary. We are unknowable. We are alien. Like, when people hear about us and lack the curiosity to actually go out and meet one of us for themselves, they just kind of believe lies. They believe what they are fed. And maybe an example of this is in the show Severance. There are different departments, right, that work in this evil corporation, right? And one of the things that they believe, like, each department seems to believe about the other departments, is that they have pouches where they rear their young, like kangaroos. And they believe that because they've never met anyone from other departments, like, that's just something they believe. And it's similar with trans people. A lot of cis conservatives look at trans people and they're like, I don't know, they're just kind of weird and I don't trust them. And then they hear, like, oh, they're grooming the kids at storybook hour, and then they're like, oh man, they're also a threat to kids. And then they hear, oh, and they're trying to, like, do DEI to destroy society because they're working for George Soros, and they're like, I guess they are evil. Like, that's kind of like the evolution of the conspiracy. And knowing a trans person is like inoculating them from that type of thinking. And like, granted, not every conservative is going to be brought over or going to be convinced by knowing a trans person, but it does help. It does help them to be able to see us as people. You know, you can tell watching that first speech with Zoe Zephyr that like her bringing her kid and having her kid meet like those Republican representatives in the Montana State House, there's a decent chance that doing that humanized her in a way that like to a degree that is probably incalculable, you know, to a number of those people in the House body. You know, there's a there that is good politics. So it is good, and good is being done. Okay? And yes, Foxy Cheshire, I should be streaming on the 31st. So we are racking up W's, and we're not alone. And I know that it can feel like we're losing everywhere, but we're not. You know, I know cases like in Iowa and Texas, people are really pessimistic about. But we will continue to fight through the losses and through the victories until we have won every single battle in every corner of this country. That's what we're going to do.